My parents kept breaking into my apartment, so I moved without telling them and let them panic. I stood frozen in the doorway of my downtown Austin apartment, the laminated wood floor cool beneath my bare feet. It was 6:30 on a Thursday evening. Slept, and the weak Texas twilight did little to penetrate the living room. I had just finished an intense consulting call, my last client of the day, and all I wanted was quiet solitude. But the quiet wasn't right. The first sign was the faint smell of garlic and oregano, a scent that should never mix with the faint trace of old wood and new paint my apartment usually carried. I set my worn leather briefcase down gently. The floorboards didn't creak. I had learned exactly where to step in the 4 months since I had signed the lease. This apartment, Unit 205, was supposed to be my sanctuary. At 28 years old, working as a freelance digital nomad, I had poured every available dollar into this space, securing my independence from the suburbs of my childhood. I moved slowly into the kitchen, the scent growing stronger. There, sitting neatly on my pristine white quartz counter, were 3 oversized aluminum trays covered in foil. They definitely had not been there when I left for my morning run at 6 a.m. I knew, instantly and with a sickening certainty, who was responsible. The contents of the trays were a classic Patricia Shepherd sampler. One was filled with her creamy, homemade mac and cheese, the kind that solidified if you didn't eat it immediately. The second held a thick, tomato-based chili, and the third was a mountain of cookies. Oatmeal raisin, which I hated. My mother, Patricia, had asked for a spare key the day I moved in. Just for emergencies. Ross, she had said, adjusting the collar of her expensive cashmere sweater. What if you get sick? What if there's a problem with the pipes and we need to check on things? It had sounded reasonable then. A normal parental request. I had reluctantly handed over the duplicate, watching her clip it onto her keychain, next to the small silver charm she wore. At the time, I told myself she was just being a mother, and that her worry was simply the price of admission for independence. Now, standing over the evidence of an unauthorized B&E, I knew that key was not for emergencies. It was an access pass. My phone, resting on the counter next to the chili, lit up. A text message from Mom. Hope you found the food. Stop by to drop it off. You really should add more color to that living room. Those gray walls are depressing. Love you. The casualness of her observation, critiquing my walls as if she were scrolling through Pinterest, infuriated me more than the food itself. I picked up the phone and dialed immediately. Ross, did you get my text? Her voice was bright, the sound of someone who believed they were performing a selfless, charitable act. Mom, you can't just let yourself into my apartment, I said, trying to keep the anger from shaking my voice. I brought you dinner, honey, she chirped. You've been working so hard at that marketing firm, and I know you haven't been cooking proper meals. You need proper nutrition. That is not the point, I stressed, pressing my fingers to the bridge of my nose, already feeling the migraine bloom behind my eyes. You need to call first. You need to ask permission. She let out a soft, dismissive laugh. Ross, sweetheart, you are my son. I don't need an appointment to see you. I was in the neighborhood, I had extra food, and I used the key. That's what the key is for. The key is for Ra's emergencies, I reiterated, my patience rapidly evaporating. Well, you not eating properly is an emergency to me, she said, her voice turning slightly defensive. Now, did you try the mac and cheese yet? I used that organic Vermont cheddar you like. The calculated deflection was a classic maneuver. I couldn't get her to address the violation because she insisted the intrusion was a benevolent rescue mission. "Mom, I am serious," I said, pushing past the food conversation. "Next time, you call first. Understood?" All right. Don't be so sensitive. I'll talk to you later, sweetie." She hung up before I could respond. I stood in my kitchen, holding the phone, tasting the metallic fear that came with realizing my space was not, in fact, mine. I convinced myself I was overreacting. She meant well. She was just being an overbearing mother. The food would, admittedly, save me about $20 on takeout. But I should have trusted my gut. I should have driven to her house right then and demanded that key back. Because 2 weeks later, the situation would escalate from unsolicited home-cooked meals to a total security breach. Slept. Following the Scotch incident and the forced dinner, I tried to convince myself that the boundary had been established, however weakly. I moved my bottles to the top shelf of the pantry, out of sight, and kept my curtains drawn. I tried to ignore the subtle sense of being watched. But the feeling of someone having rifled through my life, even under the guise of worry, had settled into my chest like cold lead. I knew I should have demanded the key back immediately, but confrontation with Patricia always felt like walking into a rigged game. I was a professional consultant, capable of managing 7-figure marketing campaigns, yet I couldn't manage my own mother. 2 weeks passed quietly. Then, on a Saturday morning, the escalation began. I walked into my living room at 9 a.m., ready to make coffee and settle into a morning of work, and stopped dead. There, curled up on my beige linen couch, was a figure under a blanket I didn't own. A total stranger. Slept, or so I thought for the first terrifying half-second. Then I recognized the untidy shock of blonde hair. It was Claire, my 24-year-old sister, bundled up and fast asleep. She lived 2 hours away in Dallas, working as a kindergarten teacher. I stood over her, breathing through my nose, trying to control the surge of adrenaline and fury. This was worse than unsolicited mac and cheese. This was an unauthorized guest. As if sensing my presence, Claire stirred and blinked open her eyes. "Oh, hey Ross," she mumbled, stretching languidly. "Did I wake you up? What are you doing here, Claire?" My voice was tight-low. She sat up, stretching. "I had a date last night with a guy who lives down here, and Mom said I could crash. Said you wouldn't mind." She slid off the couch, heading toward the kitchen, completely unconcerned. "Sorry I didn't tell you. I got in late. Did you know she left me a little gift basket?" "Wait." I intercepted her, placing my hand flat on the counter. "Mom gave you access to my apartment." Claire paused, looking genuinely confused by my intensity. "Yeah. She said she had a key, and since you're never here anyway, it would be fine for me to use the couch instead of driving all the way back to Dallas at 2 a.m. She figured she cleared it with you." That phrase, "since you're never here anyway," hit me like a blow. It was the complete, casual invalidation of my private space, based on my mother's assumption that my apartment was merely a storage unit and not my home. Later that afternoon, I was still simmering when I met my friend, Sarah Cooper, for coffee. Sarah was the only person who had the patience to listen to my parental dramas. She used the key and gave it to Claire. Sarah asked, stirring her cold brew, "Ross, that's not worrying. That's treating your entire life like a reservation system she controls." But she said, I was being selfish. I confessed, the word feeling heavy and familiar, dredging up old childhood feelings of inadequacy. When I told her that was absolutely unacceptable, she said, "Your sister needed help, and you're throwing a tantrum about her using your shower. Family helps family." That's guilt, Ross, Sarah said quietly. She knows, selfish, is your trigger. She's not talking about the shower. She's talking about the fact that you dare to have boundaries. You're 28. This isn't just about the key anymore. It's about her belief that your independence is conditional, and she can revoke it whenever she feels like it. Sarah's validation helped, but it didn't solve the problem. That night, the knot of dread I had felt earlier twisted into a hard, cold ball of anger. My apartment was supposed to be the fortress of my adulthood. It had become a revolving door controlled by Patricia. I realized I couldn't simply rely on a phone call or a text. I had to face them directly. I had to demand the key back, face to face, or surrender my sovereignty completely. I knew the confrontation would be awful, but the thought of another unexpected guest, another item moved, was becoming paralyzing. I could feel the Yazir's avoidance reflex kicking in, urging me to retreat and ignore the problem. But this time, the internal conflict between my need for autonomy and my parents' suffocating obligation was too loud to silence. I had to go home. The car ride from my Austin apartment to my parents' suburban home was a study in controlled anxiety. I went over the script in my head, rehearsing the words boundary and Elle's respect until they lost all meaning. This time, I wouldn't let the guilt-tripping work. This time, I would be the professional adult I actually was. When I arrived, the house smelled like the familiar, overwhelming scent of my mother's Sunday cooking. Slow, roasted rosemary and beef, heavy enough to cling to the curtains. My father, Robert, was in the garage, wiping down his vintage Chevrolet truck. His usual retreat when things in the house got too loud. "Ross, what a surprise," he said, setting down his rag and offering a genuine smile. Robert was 62, dependable, and usually the voice of reason. I still hoped he might be my ally. "Dad, I need to talk to both of you. It's important." His smile faded instantly. He followed me inside, his presence large and silent, closing the garage door with a quiet thud that sealed the three of us into the tense, aromatic kitchen. Patricia was already stirring a massive pot of gravy, her back to me. "Ross, stay for dinner. I just finished the Yorkshire pudding." "I can't, Mom," I said, my voice deliberately even, holding on to the script. "I need my key back." The wooden spoon she held clattered against the side of the ceramic pot, and she turned slowly. Her expression, in the span of 3 seconds, cycled through confusion, a flicker of hurt, and then settled on controlled anger. "Your key?" she asked, her voice high and thin. "The spare key I gave you," I clarified. "I need it back now." "Why on earth would you need it back?" she demanded, crossing her arms, effectively blocking the counter between us. I could feel both sets of eyes. Patricia's blazing with offense, Robert's narrowed with disappointment, boring into me. Suddenly, I felt not 28, but 12 again, standing before a firing squad for a missed curfew, or a bad grade. "Because you are using it to enter my apartment without permission," I stated, trying to sound detached. "You let yourself in to drop off food. You gave Claire access to stay over without asking me. That key was for emergencies only." Patricia's face flushed a deep, uncomfortable red. "Bringing my son food is an emergency. Making sure you are taken care of is an emergency. You work yourself to death. You barely eat. You never call. I call you 3 times a week." I countered automatically. She waved her hand dismissively. "And now you want to cut us out completely? After everything we have done for you? After we paid for your college and that first month's rent?" "I am not cutting you out," I insisted. "I am asking you respect my boundaries." She spat the word out like it was a foreign object. Boundaries. That's what they teach you at that consulting firm, isn't it? All those corporate buzzwords. Boundaries. Personal space. As if your own mother is some kind of threat. Patricia. Robert finally interjected, his voice low in a warning. He only used her first name when he was trying to prevent a full explosion. She ignored him entirely. I raised you. I clothed you. And now you're standing in my kitchen accusing me of what exactly? Being a good mother. You are breaking into my apartment, I said. It is not breaking in when I have a key. Her voice cracked. Tears welled up in her eyes. The exact same theatrical tears she used whenever she needed to deflect criticism or win an argument. I can't believe you're doing this to me. I worry about you every single day. You're out there all alone, and God forbid something happens and we can't get to you. Nothing is going to happen to me, I argued. If there is a fire, I call 911 like a normal person. Robert finally stepped forward, placing a steady hand on my shoulder, a gesture that usually meant comfort but now felt like restraint. Ross, I think you're being paranoid, he said. The word stung, especially coming from him. Dad was supposed to be the rational one, the one who taught me self-reliance. We are your parents. We worry. I'm not paranoid, I insisted, shaking my head. I am asking for basic respect for my home. Robert crossed his arms, his face hardening into an image of generational authority. We are not giving the key back. The room went silent, save for the low rumble of the gravy pot. What? You heard me, he said firmly. We are not giving it back. We are your parents, Ross. This is ridiculous. The other's betrayal from my father cemented the finality of their position. I saw then that the key wasn't about emergencies. It was a symbol of their continuous ownership over my life. I took a deep breath. Then I'll change my locks. Patricia gasped, the tears forgotten. You wouldn't dare. Watch me. I turned, walked out of the kitchen, past my father's stony disappointment, and left their house without another word, knowing I had just traded a small confrontation for a full-scale war. I drove straight back to my apartment and immediately began Googling locksmiths who offered same-day service. My temporary solution was physical, a defense against the absolute despair of their refusal. The installation of the new locks had given me a 2-week reprieve. The heavy, polished brass of the new deadbolts felt like a genuine layer of protection, a tangible representation of the line I had finally drawn. I felt a fragile sense of victory. I was able to leave my apartment in the morning without the paralyzing fear of what might be waiting for me when I got back. I had stood up to my parents, and the consequence thus far had only been silence. Then I came home from a late meeting on a Tuesday. I opened my front door, tossed my briefcase onto the floor, and paused, immediately detecting a faint, floral perfume. Not my mother's usual scent, but something similar, sharper, like overly concentrated gardenias. I walked into the living room, and my blood ran cold. Patricia was sitting on my beige linen couch. My couch. She had set a pristine, porcelain teacup on the coffee table, and was paging through a magazine. Architectural Digest, of course, giving my furniture silent, professional critique. It was a perfect, domestic scene, except it was staged in my locked, private home. My breath hitched. The briefcase hit the wood floor with a sharp, heavy thud. Mom. I managed, the word a rasp. How did you get in here? I changed the locks. She looked up, completely calm, and smiled. It wasn't the warm smile of a loving mother, but the satisfied, calculating smirk of someone who had successfully bypassed a security system. She held up a key, a shiny, Brand new key that looked identical to the one I had just spent $200 trying to replace. My heart hammered against my ribs, instantly shifting my state from shock to pure, unadulterated sear rage. "Where?" I demanded, walking toward her, my voice rising. "Did you get that key?" She set the magazine down. "I called your landlord. Nice man, Daniel West. I explained that I was your mother and needed access in case of emergencies, which, honestly, you not answering my calls for 2 days constitutes." He understood completely. He gave me a copy yesterday. The room seemed to tilt. I grabbed the back of an armchair to steady myself. She had gone, behind my back, to the one external authority figure who still had control over my home. She had weaponized his good nature and my own perceived vulnerability. "You went behind my back to my landlord." "Don't be so dramatic, Ross," she sighed, standing up slowly. She was the picture of martyred patience. "I am your mother. I have every right to check on you. And thank God I did. Have you seen your refrigerator? There is nothing in there but 2-day-old takeout and that sad yogurt you keep buying." "Get out," I said. The words were flat, stripped of all emotion, which somehow made them sound colder and more menacing than a shout. She blinked. "Excuse me." "Get out. Now." She collected her purse and teacup with deliberate, aggrieved movements. "I cannot believe the way you are speaking to me. I came here out of love, out of concern, and this is how you treat me. You manipulate my landlord into giving you unauthorized access to my apartment. That is not love. That is control. It's motherhood," she countered, walking toward the door. She paused and turned back, her face suddenly hard. "When you have children of your own, you will understand. You never stop worrying. You never stop needing to know they are safe. I will be keeping this key for emergencies." The door clicked shut, leaving me standing alone, shaking with a fury that felt hot and chemical. She hadn't just broken a boundary, she had proved that she would use manipulation and lie to external authorities to maintain control. I immediately called Daniel West, the landlord. "Mr. West," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "This is Ross Shepard, Unit 205. Oh, Ross, your mother. Very concerned woman. She explained you had been unwell and she needed to check on you." "Mr. West," I interrupted, my control snapping. "Under absolutely no circumstances are you to give anyone, and I mean anyone, access to my apartment without my explicit written permission. That includes my parents." "She lied to you. I am perfectly fine." There was a lengthy, uncomfortable silence on the other end of the line. I am sorry. I did not realize there was an issue." She was very convincing. "I apologize. It will not happen again. I should have verified with you." I hung up. She had successfully made me feel like I was going crazy, then forced me to battle against my own landlord to secure my legal rights. The violation was no longer domestic, it was now institutional. That evening, I called a different locksmith, changed my lock's Asia again, slept, and sent Daniel West a certified letter stating that any further breach of my access policy would be a violation of my lease and result in legal action. This time, I knew the battle was far from over. After the episode with the landlord, I had enjoyed 3 weeks of exhausting, vigilant peace. I changed my passwords, checked my mail daily, and double-checked the deadbolts every time I left the apartment. The legal letter I sent Daniel West had apparently been enough of a threat to keep my mother from trying the key trick again. I told Sarah that I thought the message had finally gotten through. That the combination of a lock change, a heated confrontation, and a legal threat had finally established the permanence of my boundaries. I was wrong. I came home on a Friday afternoon, expecting the sterile, silent order I had fought so hard for. Instead, I was hit by the heavy, comforting smell of tuna casserole and something faintly, unsettlingly floral. The same scent that had preceded my mother's last successful invasion. I walked into the kitchen. Sure enough, a casserole dish sat on the stove, covered in aluminum foil still warm. A sticky note was attached. "You're not eating enough. Love, Mom." My hand started to shake. I checked the front door. Double, locked. I checked the sliding balcony door, chained and locked. The locks I had paid for twice were secure. Then I walked into my bedroom. The window was open, the screen pushed out, resting askew on the ground beneath it. A chill evening breeze drifted through the apartment, carrying the scent of damp earth and the neighbor's overgrown jasmine bush. My dirty laundry, which I had left in a hamper that morning, was gone. I walked over to the dresser. Every single item of clothing, shirts, socks, underwear, was washed, dried, and folded neatly into their appropriate drawers. My sink, which had held 3 days' worth of coffee mugs, was empty. Slept. The dishes were clean and stacked in the cupboard. She hadn't just broken in, she had performed an act of domestic espionage. I walked to the window and looked out. The apartment was on the second floor, a height that most people would consider impossible without gear. But attached to the building, running directly below my window, was a decorative trellis, lattice work covered in thick, thorny climbing roses. It was sturdy enough, designed to support the plants, but sturdy enough to support a person. The sheer, terrifying absurdity of the image, my 59-year-old mother climbing a rose trellis to break into my second-story apartment to do my laundry, smashed my composure. This was the ultimate violation. The locks meant nothing. The legal threats meant nothing. She viewed my private space as a challenge to be overcome. I grabbed my phone and called her. She answered on the first ring. "Ross, did you find the casserole? I used that recipe you always loved. The one with the celery. Did you climb through my window?" I cut her off, my voice loud and unsteady. Silence. The sound of distant traffic was the only thing I could hear on her end of the line. "Mom, answer me," I demanded. "Did you climb through my window to get into my apartment?" "Well, the door was locked," she said, her voice dropping into a defensive, petulant tone. Like a teenager caught in a lie. "What was I supposed to do? I made you a nice dinner. I did your laundry. And now you're yelling at me." "I am yelling at you because you broke into my apartment. It is breaking in and entering. It is a crime." "It's not breaking in when it's family, Ross. You're being ridiculous. You climbed through my window because you changed the locks again." "If you would just give us a key like a normal son, I wouldn't have to go to such extremes. This is your fault, not mine." I ended the call and immediately dialed Dad, who answered with a weary sigh. "Hello, sweetheart. Dade. Did you know Mom broke into my apartment through the window?" "Your mother told me she stopped by," he said heavily. "She didn't stop by, Dad. She climbed a trellis and broke in through my window, because I wouldn't give her a key." "Ross, your mother worries about you," he said, using the same tired, dismissive language. "She can't sleep at night, thinking about you all alone in that apartment. If you would just cooperate, she wouldn't have to resort to breaking and entering. That's what you're calling this." The rage was a cold, pure sensation now. "You're making this much harder than it needs to be," he stated. "Just give us a key. Let us check on you. That's all she wants. And we have the right to make sure our son is safe." Then, he delivered the final, devastating blow. "You're being selfish, and paranoid, and frankly, I'm disappointed in you." He hung up on me. I sat on my couch, staring at the trellis visible through the open window. It was the moment of shattered safety. I finally understood. I could change the locks 100 times. I could install cameras. I could call the police. It wouldn't matter. They believed they had the absolute, inherent right to own my space. They believed my independence was temporary and my adulthood was optional. The anxiety lifted, replaced by a cold, frightening clarity. There was only one solution left. I had to disappear. The moment I hung up on my father, the hot, blinding rage was replaced by a cold, analytical determination. His voice, calling me paranoid and cruel, had extinguished the last flicker of hope that I could resolve this through dialogue or conventional boundaries. They had proven, through keys, lies, and trellis climbing, that they would never stop. I realized that my survival depended not on better locks, but on total physical disappearance. This was not an overreaction. It was a necessary security measure against two people who believed my life was their property. Slept. I spent the next 2 weeks planning. Every decision was made with the meticulous, paranoid focus of an operative preparing for exfiltration. I started browsing apartments in the Seaholm district, an upscale area across town, focusing only on high-security, high-rise buildings. The building had to have a dollar doorman, key card access to the elevators, and a strict guest sign in policy. It had to be a fortress. I found a unit on the 14th floor that cost $400 more per month than my current lease, but the security features were non-negotiable. It had a 24-hour security desk, and the lease required a credit check, first and last month's rent, and an exorbitant security deposit. I signed the papers on a Tuesday morning, taking the keys from the leasing agent, and telling absolutely no one of the new address. The hardest part was managing the logistics without alerting my parents. I took a Friday off work, telling my few clients I had a scheduled medical procedure that would keep me offline. I rented a moving truck from a company 20 miles outside of Austin, paying cash and using a fake name. The precautions feeling absurd and completely justified at the same time. I called the only two people I fully trusted: Sarah Cooper, my confidante, and Marcus Harris, a colleague I knew was discreet and had no connection to my family. "You're really going through with the vanishing act?" Sarah asked, her expression a mix of awe and concern, as we stood in my nearly empty living room on moving day. "I have to, Sarah. They broke in through the window to fold my underwear. I have to put an ocean between us, even if that ocean is only 8 miles and 14 stories high. This is some spy movie stuff, Ross," Marcus said, taping up a box of my marketing materials. Marcus was a charming, witty guy, but also notoriously secretive about his own past, making him the perfect, emotionally distant help I needed. "They forced my hand," I replied, feeling a strange, cold calm. "If I tell them, they'll show up here and try to stop me, or worse, they'll follow me in separate cars and triangulate the new address." We worked fast and efficiently. By 3 p.m., the old apartment, Unit 205, was hollowed out. Every piece of furniture, every book, every picture, gone. The only things that remained were the clean, folded items my mother had put in my dresser, which I carefully bagged and moved out last. My final act in the old apartment was the most important. I cleaned obsessively. I wiped down every surface, vacuumed the floors, and scrubbed the counters, removing any stray hair, speck of dirt, or anything that could be traced back to me. It wasn't just cleaning, it was erasing my presence, ensuring the space was a total vacuum. At 5:30, I stood in the empty living room, the late afternoon sun throwing long, dramatic shadows. I took one last, deep breath of the air that had once represented freedom and had come to symbolize violation. Then I locked the door and dropped my keys, along with a certified note stating I had vacated the premises, into Daniel West's after-hours mailbox. The new apartment, with its towering view of the city and its perpetually guarded lobby, felt safer. It was smaller, but the paranoid relief was worth the extra $400 per month. As I unpacked boxes late into the night, arranging my furniture and hanging my curtains, I felt the heavy, cold knot in my chest slowly begin to unwind. For the first time in months, I felt like the air I was breathing was truly mine. The physical relocation was complete, the first and most difficult step in my journey towards our autonomy vs. obligation. The stage was set for the final, necessary conflict. The 2 days following the move were the most stressful and yet the most peaceful of my life. I was safe, cocooned 14 stories above the city, guarded by steel and the stern presence of Victor, the 24-hour doorman. I had completed the physical disappearance. Now came the emotional one. I stopped replying. Saturday passed. I watched the messages pile up on my phone, ignoring the buzzes and notifications. They were mildly concerned at first. A text from my mother, "Haven't heard from you. Everything all right? Call when you can." My father sent a photo of his newly tuned truck. I sent back nothing. By Sunday afternoon, the frequency of contact ramped up. 17 missed calls, 12 text messages, escalating from simple check into expressions of vague worry. "Ross, please call us back. We are worried. Did something happen? Are you okay?" I deleted them without listening to the voicemails. Monday morning, the phone was practically vibrating off the counter. 23 missed calls. The messages were tinged with true panic, shifting from concern to accusation. If you're okay, why won't you answer? This is cruel, Ross." I ate breakfast calmly, watched the Austin skyline, and let the chaos build. I knew what would happen next. They would go to the apartment. They would find the final act of my defense. The last message came in at 10:30 a.m. I stared at the notification for a full minute before selecting it. The most recent voicemail. I pressed play, and the sound that came through the speaker made my stomach clench. It was Patricia's voice, hysterical, breaking, utterly stripped of her usual theatrical control. "Ross, oh my God, we are at your apartment, and it is completely empty. There is nothing here. Ross, where are you? What happened? Oh God. Robert, what if something terrible has happened?" The message cut off abruptly. I leaned back on my new sofa, closing my eyes. They had tried to break in again. They had found the void. They had finally felt a fraction of the utter powerlessness and violation I had felt every time I came home to find my life rearranged. I let the sound of her panic reverberate, letting the fear and the sheer relief wash over me. I needed them to feel the desperation of total loss of control. I waited one more hour. Let them panic. Let the weight of their own actions settle on them. Then, I called back. Patricia answered before the first ring finished. "Ross, oh thank God," we thought. "We didn't know. Your apartment is empty." Why would you think something terrible happened to me? I kept my voice measured, steady, and entirely devoid of the emotion she was selling. "Because everything is gone! Your apartment is completely empty! There is nothing there," she wailed. "That's not an explanation, Mom," I said, cold as ice. "Why are you at my apartment right now?" The line went quiet. I could hear fumbling, ragged breathing. "Mom," I asked you a question. Why are you at my apartment? We were worried you weren't answering your phone, she faltered. I didn't answer for 2 days. 2 days, Mom. And your response was to break into my apartment again. I pressed. Did you climb through the window again? Did you convince Daniel West to let you in again? Which method of breaking and entering did you use this time? I heard a heavy thud, likely the phone changing hands. Then Robert's voice, hard and accusatory. Ross, what the hell is going on? Where are you? Where's all your stuff? I moved, I said simply. You what? I moved to a new apartment. Because you two repeatedly refused to respect my boundaries. I chose to move without telling you and let you panic because you left me no other choice. This was the triumphant assertion of self, the emotional payoff. We're your parents. We have every right to check on you. Robert thundered. No, Dad, you don't. You climbed through my window because I wouldn't give you a key. You manipulated my landlord. You entered my home repeatedly without permission. That's not parenting. That's stalking. That's not. We were worried about you. Then call me, text me, ask to visit like normal people. You do not get to break into my home. I insisted. Fine. His voice was laced with anger and shock. Fine.
Give us your new address.
No. Excuse me. I said no. I repeated, my voice not shaking, but entirely firm. You have proven I cannot trust you. You prove that no lock, no boundary, no clearly stated request for privacy will stop you from doing whatever you want. So, no. I am not giving you my address. Patricia grabbed the phone back, her voice cracking. We are your parents? You can't just cut us off. I am not cutting you off. I am protecting myself. There is a difference. This is insane. You're being paranoid and cruel. And I am being an adult who gets to decide who enters my home. That is my right. You took that right away from me over and over again. Even after I explicitly told you to stop. You left me no choice. If you want a relationship with me, it happens on my terms. We can meet for coffee. We can have dinner at restaurants. We can talk on the phone. But you do not get access to my home. Not anymore. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. I confirmed. When you are ready to respect my boundaries, let me know. Until then, this is how things are. I hung up before either of them could respond. The line was severed. The final, definitive boundary was set. The wife's triumphant assertion was complete. That phone call marked the beginning of the great, exhausting silence. 4 months have passed since the confrontation, since the day I moved without telling them and let them panic. They still do not know where I live. They still call, less frequently now, but they call. The relationship exists, now only on my strictly enforced terms. We have had coffee twice at a Starbucks downtown, a neutral, public ground. The conversations were tense, uncomfortable, and filled with heavy, loaded silences and painfully careful words. Patricia cried both times, deploying her guilt tactics, but this time, the tears felt like rain on glass. I saw them, but they didn't penetrate the fortress I had built. Robert barely spoke, still nursing the disappointment that I had dared to choose autonomy over his authority. But they have not asked for my address again. They have not tried to follow me home from the coffee shop. They are learning, slowly, painfully, that I meant what I said. The total removal of myself was the only language they understood. I still have moments of guilt, thinking about the trauma the empty apartment must have caused them. But then I remember the window screen on the ground, the folded laundry, and my father calling me paranoid. My vigilance has become my peace. Last week, my mother texted me. I made pot roast. Your favorite. Would you like to come over for dinner on Sunday? It was a test. A soft, familiar invitation back to the home, where boundaries did not exist. I stared at the message for a long time, the conflict between my deep-seated desire for familial comfort and my hard-won independence warring inside me. I finally picked up my phone and typed a simple reply. I'll be there at 6. I'll be there at 6. It is not forgiveness. Not yet, and maybe not ever. But it is a start. It is a relationship continuing on my terms, at my pace, with the boundaries firmly established. Because I am not their little boy anymore. I am Ross, 28 years old, with my own high-rise apartment that has a Dortmund key, card access, and locks that only I have keys to. I have protected my space, and in doing so, I have finally secured my life.